The lights in the cantina were too bright and the music was too loud, but Jinho did not care anymore. He sat at the corner table with his back to the wall like his father had taught him. When he was a boy back on Earth, the datapad in his hands showed the same message he had read 20 times already: HFY denydresin insufficient combat experience hiplect may reapply in 6 months. The Galactic Defense Force had rejected him again. This was the third time this year, and each rejection felt like a punch to his chest. He had trained for 5 years. He had studied every manual, every tactical guide, every piece of military history he could find. He had even spent his life savings on combat simulation training, but none of that mattered to the people who decided who got to protect the galaxy around him. Aliens from dozens of different worlds filled the cantina. Some had scales, some had fur, some had skin colors that humans had never seen before. They talked and laughed and made deals while drinking things that would probably kill a human. The air smelled like ozone and exotic spices and something that reminded him of his mother's cooking. Back home, Jinho took another sip of his drink. It was supposed to be whiskey, but it tasted like motor oil mixed with regret. He had been saving money for months to afford even this cheap stuff. Everything was expensive when you were human. Everything was harder when you came from a species that had only been in space for 200 years. The other species had been exploring the stars for thousands of years. They had technologies that seemed like magic to humans. They had ships that could cross the galaxy in days while human ships took weeks. They had weapons that could destroy planets and shields that could stop anything humans could throw at them. So why did Jinho think he could compete with them? Why did he think a human could ever be good enough to join the elite forces that kept peace in the galaxy maybe his friends back on Earth were right? Maybe he should have stayed home and worked in the factory like his father. Maybe he should have married his childhood sweetheart and had kids and lived a quiet, normal life. Instead, he had come out here to the frontier to chase dreams that were too big for someone like him. The cantina door opened and Jinho looked up without thinking. It was a habit he had developed over the years. Always watch who comes in, always know where the exits are, always be ready for trouble. But the person who walked in was not trouble, at least not the kind he expected. She was beautiful in a way that made his chest tight. Her skin was a soft green color that seemed to glow in the dim light. She had 4 arms that moved with perfect grace and eyes that sparkled like stars. She wore the uniform of an Altarian diplomatic officer, and everyone in the cantina turned to look at her. Jinho knew who she was. Everyone in this part of the galaxy knew Ambassador Mireille. She was smart and powerful and dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with weapons. She could negotiate treaties that would reshape entire star systems. She could convince enemies to become allies with just her words. She was everything that Jinho wished he could be. She walked through the cantina like she owned it. Her 3 companions followed behind her. They were all Altarians with the same green skin and 4 arms. They talked quietly among themselves in their musical language while scanning the room for threats. Mireille stopped at the bar and ordered drinks for her group. The bartender, a gruff Carillion with too many eyes, rushed to serve her. Nobody kept Ambassador Mireille waiting. That was when she saw him. Her eyes met his across the crowded room, and for a moment Jinho felt his heart stop. She smiled, but it was not a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who had just found something amusing. She said something to her companions, and they all looked at him. Now they were all smiling the same way. Mireille picked up her drink and walked over to his table. Her companions followed. Her movements were smooth and confident like a predator who knew she was at the top of the food chain. "Hey, Mr. Almost," she said loud enough for half the cantina to hear. "Still trying to join the big leagues." How adorable the words hit him like a slap. Jinho felt his face burn with embarrassment. Every person in the cantina was looking at him now. Some were smiling, some were shaking their heads, some looked like they felt sorry for him. Mr. Almost, that was what she had started calling him 6 months ago when he had tried to help her during a pirate attack. He had almost saved her delegation, almost stopped the pirates from stealing their cargo, almost proven that humans could be heroes almost, but not quite. The pirates had gotten away with half the cargo and 3 hostages. Mireille had been polite about it afterward. She had thanked him for trying. She had even written a letter of recommendation for his Defense Force application. But she had also started calling him Mr. Almost. One day Myri Jinho said as quietly as he could, "One day you will need someone who does not give up." She laughed, and it sounded like crystal bells breaking. It was a beautiful sound that somehow made him feel even worse. Humans, she said to her companions, always dreaming bigger than their abilities. Jinho here thinks he is going to be the next great hero of the galaxy. Tell me, Mr. Almost, what makes you think you are special? The cantina had gone completely quiet. Even the music had stopped. Everyone was watching now. This was better than any entertainment they could have paid for. Your species has been in space for what, 2 centuries, she continued. We have been exploring the stars for 20,000 years. We have seen the rise and fall of civilizations that you humans cannot even imagine. We have technologies that your people will not discover for another millennium. Jinho felt something cold settle in his stomach. She was right about everything. Humans were newcomers to the galaxy. They were weak and primitive compared to the ancient civilizations that ruled the stars. But then he thought about his grandfather, who had fought in the wars on Earth when humans were still learning to fly. He thought about the first human astronauts who had risked everything to reach the moon. He thought about all the humans who had died trying to push further into space so that people like him could sit in this cantina and dream of impossible things. Maybe that is exactly why we are different, he said, standing up slowly. His 6-foot frame was impressive by human standards, but average among the aliens in the cantina. Still, he felt every eye in the room watching him. We do not have 20,000 years of experience telling us what is impossible. For just a moment, Myri looked surprised. Then her smile returned, but it was different now. It was colder. Do not worry, Mr. Almost, she said. I am sure you will find your calling eventually, maybe as a cargo hauler. The laughter that followed him as he walked out of the cantina was worse than any physical pain he had ever felt. It followed him down the corridor and into the elevator. It echoed in his ears as he rode up to his small apartment on the residential level. As the elevator doors closed, he caught one last glimpse of the cantina. Myri was already back with her friends, talking and laughing like he had never existed, like he was just another failed human who had reached too high and fallen too far. But as the elevator carried him away from the laughter and the humiliation, Jinho made himself a promise. Someday he would prove her wrong. Someday Ambassador Myri would need help, and he would be the one to give it. Someday she would stop calling him Mr. Almost. He did not know how or when or even if he would survive long enough to see it happen. But he knew one thing for certain: he was human, and humans did not give up. 3 months had passed since that terrible night in the cantina, but Jinho still woke up thinking about the laughter. 3 months of working odd jobs and sleeping in cheap hostels while he saved every credit he could earn. 3 months of being called Mr. Almost by strangers who had heard the story. But today was different. Today he stood on the bridge of his own ship. The Resilience was not much to look at. She was a cargo hauler that had seen better decades. Her hull was patched with mismatched metal plates, and her paint was faded and chipped. The previous owner had sold her cheap because nobody wanted a ship that old. But Jinho saw something in her that others missed. She was human-built, human-designed, human tough. Captain Kyung called from the engine room. I have finished the modifications. Jin smiled as he heard the excitement in his engineer's voice. Kyung was brilliant, but no major shipping company would hire him. They said his ideas were too dangerous, too experimental, too different. But that was exactly why Jinho had recruited him. The jump drive is running at 150% efficiency, Kyung continued, and I have managed to boost our shield generators beyond anything the manufacturer thought possible. Jinho nodded as he reviewed their latest contract. It was dangerous work, taking supplies to colonies in disputed space. The big companies would not take these jobs because the profit margins were too small and the risks too high. But for a small crew with a patched-up ship, it was exactly what they needed. These frontier colonies needed everything: food, medicine, tools, weapons parts for their equipment. Most of all, they needed someone who would not abandon them when things got difficult. The major powers in the galaxy were too busy playing politics to care about a few thousand humans trying to build new lives on distant worlds. But Jinho cared, his crew cared, and that made all the difference. Bora sat in the pilot seat running final checks on their navigation systems. She had been a military pilot before the war ended. They had told her she was too reckless for peacetime service, too willing to take risks, but Jinho knew that sometimes reckless was exactly what you needed. The colonies they served were scattered across dozens of star systems. Some were mining operations on asteroids, some were farming communities on barely habitable worlds. Some were research stations studying things that the galaxy had never seen before. Each one was a small piece of human determination, a proof that his species would not be contained to their home system. Just because other races thought they belonged there. Incoming transmission, Bora announced from her station. It is marked emergency priority. The main screen flickered to life, showing a young Altarian officer. His green skin looked pale with fear, and behind him red warning lights flashed in the darkness. "This is Lieutenant Tarek of the Altarian diplomatic vessel Harmony," he said in a voice that shook with desperation. "We are under attack by unknown hostiles. Our engines are down, our weapons are offline. We have very important people on board, including Ambassador Mirajinho." Felt his heart skip when he heard that name. "Please, anyone who receives this message, we need help immediately. We cannot hold out much longer." The transmission cut to static, and the bridge fell silent. Jinho looked at his crew and saw the same thought in their eyes. The smart thing would be to forward the message to the nearest military base. The safe thing would be to stay out of it entirely. But the human thing was something completely different. "Bora, plot a course for their last known position. Maximum burn, sir," she said carefully. "We are just a cargo ship. We do not have military weapons. We do not have armor. We do not have any business fighting pirates." "Then we will have to get creative," Jinho said, turning to his engineer. "Kyung, what would you need to turn our mining lasers into something more useful?" The young man's face lit up with the particular joy of someone who was about to attempt something impossible. "Give me 20 minutes, Captain. I will make those pirates wish they had never heard of human engineering." As the Resilience roared through space toward the battle, Jinho felt something he had not experienced in months. Hope for too long. He had been trying to prove himself to people who would never accept him. He had been begging for permission to be a hero when he should have just started being. When the colonies needed him, his crew needed him, and now maybe Ambassador Murray needed him too. It did not matter that their ship was old. It did not matter that they were outgunned. It did not matter that every logical calculation said they should not survive the next few hours. They were human, and humans did not calculate the odds before doing the right thing. 20 minutes later, Kyung emerged from the engine room with grease on his hands and a wild grin on his face. The mining lasers were now running at 300% power. The cargo bay doors had been rigged for explosive decompression, and their entire ship had been turned into a weapon. It was insane. It was dangerous. It was probably going to get them all killed. It was also the most human thing Jinho had ever done. As they dropped out of hyperspace near the coordinates of the distress call, Jinho saw the Harmony hanging dead in space. Her elegant curves were scarred with weapon burns, and her running lights flickered weakly around her. 3 pirate ships circled like predators, preparing to finish their prey. The pirates were Korvaxi, judging by their ship designs, military-grade vessels with enough firepower to reduce a diplomatic ship to scrap metal in minutes, sir. Bora said quietly, "Those are not just pirates. Those are professional raiders. Our cargo ship should not even register as a threat to them." "Good," Jinho replied, studying the tactical display. "That means they will underestimate us." The lead pirate vessel noticed their approach and turned toward them. Warning shots flashed across their bow, followed by a harsh transmission. "Human ship, retreat immediately or be destroyed." "This is a Korvaxi salvage operation." Jinho opened a channel to both the pirates and the Harmony. "This is Captain Jinho of the merchant vessel Resilience," he said in his calmest voice. "We are here to assist the diplomatic vessel." On the screen he could see the bridge of the Harmony, where Ambassador Murray was working frantically at a damaged control panel. Her 4 arms moved with desperate efficiency as she tried to restore power to their systems. When she looked up and saw him on the transmission screen, her expression changed from hope to shock to something that might have been recognition. "Jinho," she said, "what are you doing here? You need to leave immediately." "These pirates have military weapons." "I know," he said simply. "Then why are you still here?" "Because someone called for help, and humans always answer." The pirate captain was still demanding their surrender. The Harmony was still powerless and drifting. The tactical situation was completely hopeless. Jinho looked at his crew and saw no fear in their eyes, only determination. "Bora, take us in evasive pattern Delta." Kyung target their lead ship's weapon systems. What happened next would be talked about in spacer bars for years to come. The little cargo ship that should not have been able to fight began to dance. The Harmony looked like a dying whale floating in the black ocean of space. Her silver hull was torn open in 3 places and atmosphere was slowly leaking out in frozen clouds. The elegant, diplomatic vessel that had once been the pride of the Altarian fleet now hung powerless while 3 massive pirate ships prepared to finish. Her Jinho watched the tactical display as the Korvaxi raiders moved into position. Their ships were twice the size of the Resilience with armor plating that could withstand anything his modified mining lasers could throw at them. Each one carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Any sane person would have run, but Jinho was beginning to think that sanity was overrated. Bora, his pilot, was threatening the Resilience through a maze of debris. From the first attack, her hands moved over the controls with the smooth precision of someone who had flown combat missions in 3 different wars. "Sir," she said without taking her eyes off the navigation display, "I am reading massive energy signatures from those pirate ships. If they focus fire on us, we will be vaporized in seconds. Then we will not give them the chance to focus fire." Jinho replied. Kyung's status report: "The mining lasers are ready, Captain. The cargo bay charges are primed, and I have one more surprise for you." On the main screen, the lead pirate vessel was turning toward them. Its weapon ports were glowing with deadly energy. The captain was a scarred Korvaxi who looked like he had been fighting since before humans discovered fire. "Human ship, this is your final warning. Retreat now or face the consequence." Yenjo opened a channel to the Harmony where he could see Mireille and her crew working desperately to restore power to their system's ambassador. He said formally, "This is Captain Jinho of the merchant vessel Resilience. We are here to provide assistance." Her forearm stopped moving and she looked directly at him through the screen. Her expression was a mixture of hope and disbelief. "Jinho, what are you doing here? You need to leave right now. These pirates have enough firepower to destroy both our ships." "I know," he said calmly, "but you sent out a distress call and humans always answer distress calls." The pirate captain was getting impatient. Energy beams lanced across space, just missing the Resilience hull. The shots were meant as warnings, but they were close enough to make the bridge shake. "Bora, take us into attack pattern Alpha," Jinho ordered. "All power to forward shields." What followed was not really a battle. It was more like a demonstration of why humans had survived long enough to reach the stars. The Resilience should not have been able to fight 3 military vessels and win, but nobody had explained that to her crew. Bora flew the cargo ship like she was piloting a fighter craft. She used the gravitational field of a nearby asteroid to slingshot around the enemy formation. She dove through gaps in their fire that were barely wider than their hull. She made the old cargo hauler dance through space like a leaf in a hurricane. Kyung had turned their mining equipment into weapons of war. His modified lasers struck with surgical precision, targeting sensor arrays and weapon systems instead of trying to punch through heavy armor. When the pirates tried to track their movements, he released clouds of metallic debris that confused their targeting computers. But the real surprise came when the largest pirate ship tried to ram them. "Emergency maneuver," Jinho called out. Bora rolled the Resilience into a spiral that should have torn the ship apart. Instead, she used their own momentum to whip around the enemy vessel and come up behind their engine array. Now Kyung, the engineer, triggered the cargo bay doors and 20 tons of raw materials exploded outward in a cloud of metal and rock. The debris struck the pirate ship at over 1,000 kilometers per hour. The impact disabled their engines and sent them spinning out of control. The other 2 pirate vessels stopped their attack and began retreating toward the edge of the system. They had signed up to raid a helpless diplomatic ship, not to fight whatever kind of monster the humans had brought to the party. "Harmony, this is Resilience," Jinho said into the com system. "Are you in need of assistance?" There was a long pause before Mireille answered, and when she did, her voice was very different from the last time they had spoken. "Yes, Captain, we very much need assistance." As the Resilience moved alongside the damaged diplomatic vessel, Jinho felt something he had not experienced in a very long time. Pride, not the kind of pride that came from proving someone wrong, but the quiet satisfaction of doing something that mattered. His crew had just saved the lives of 37 beings from 6 different species. They had prevented a diplomatic incident that could have destabilized an entire sector of space. They had taken a cargo ship and turned it into a weapon of justice. More importantly, they had proven that humans belonged in this galaxy not because they were the strongest or the fastest or the smartest, but because they were the ones who showed up when people needed help. As the docking tube connected between the two ships, Jinho prepared to meet Ambassador Murray face to face for the first time since that night in the cantina. He wondered if she would still call him Mr. Almost On. The damaged bridge of the Harmony Murray stared at the human ship through the viewport. It was ugly and patched and held together with determination and spare parts, but it was also the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. Lieutenant Tarek, her aide, was studying the tactical recordings of the battle. He said quietly, I have never seen anything like that. The way they fought, it was like they were reading the pirates' minds. Humans, she said softly, do not fight the way we fight. They fight the way they live, with no plan except to never give up. She thought about the night in the cantina when she had humiliated Jinho in front of everyone. She remembered calling him Mr. Almost and laughing at his dreams now. That same man had just saved her life and the lives of everyone on her ship. The docking tube sealed with a soft hiss, and she heard footsteps approaching. Ambassador Murray, the voice said. She turned to see Captain Jinho standing in the doorway. He looked older than she remembered, and there were new lines around his eyes, but he stood straighter now, and there was something in his expression that had not been there before. Confidence. Captain, she said formally on behalf of the Altarian delegation, I want to thank you for your actions today. You saved not just our lives, but a critical peace negotiation. Just doing my job, Ambassador, he replied. She studied his face, looking for any sign of smugness or revenge, but all she saw was the same quiet determination that had driven him to answer her distress call. You came, he said. It was not a question. You called for help, he replied, and that is what humans do, help. The docking bay of the Harmony was a mess of twisted metal and emergency lighting, but Jinho had seen worse. The diplomatic vessel had taken a beating, but she was still spaceworthy. His crew was already working alongside the Altarian engineers to repair the most critical systems. Meyer stood at the entrance to the docking tube, watching him with an expression he could not read. She had changed out of her torn diplomatic robes into a simple work uniform, but she still carried herself with the same grace that had made her famous throughout the galaxy. Captain, she said, when he approached on behalf of the Altarian delegation, I want to thank you for your actions today. You saved not just our lives, but a critical peace negotiation between our species and the Terran Alliance. Just doing my job, Ambassador, Jinho replied, but his crew could see the satisfaction in his eyes. She studied his face, looking for any sign of the anger or resentment she would have expected after the way she had treated him, but all she saw was the same quiet determination that had driven him to answer her distress callous. They worked together over the next few hours. Murray found herself watching the human crew with growing fascination in the engine room. Kyung was performing what could only be called mechanical miracles. He had somehow managed to restore power to systems that the Altarian engineers had declared beyond repair. His methods were unconventional and sometimes downright dangerous, but they worked. Your engineer, she said to Jinho, he is doing things with our quantum matrix that our own technicians said were impossible. Kyung does not believe in impossible, Jinho said. None of us do. That is what makes us human. Bora was helping to repair the navigation systems. Her pilot training had given her an understanding of ship systems that impressed even the experienced Altarian crew. She worked with quiet efficiency, never complaining about the dangerous conditions or the long hours. The humans worked differently than other species. Murray realized they did not follow the careful procedures and safety protocols that had been developed over thousands of years. Instead, they improvised and adapted, finding solutions that no one else would have thought of. Is that why you came? She asked quietly to prove a point. Jinho considered the question while watching his crew work alongside the Altarian engineers. I came because you needed help. The proving part was just a bonus that evening. As the two ships traveled together toward the nearest starbase, Murray found herself in the observation lounge, staring out at the stars. She had been thinking about the human captain and his crew, trying to understand what she had witnessed. Lieutenant Tarek, her aide, found her there. An hour later, he said quietly, I have been reviewing the tactical recordings from the battleland. What did you find? The humans should not have been able to do what they did. Their ship was outgunned, outmanned, and outclassed in every way, but they won anyway. Marie nodded. She had been thinking the same thing. Pull up the files on human military actions over the past decade, she ordered. What she found changed everything she thought she knew about humanity. The records were full of stories that seemed impossible. A single human freighter holding off a raider fleet for 6 hours to save a colony. A human rescue ship diving into a collapsing star system to evacuate civilians. A human cargo vessel somehow defeating 3 times its number of pirates. While other species had larger fleets and more advanced technology, humans had something else. They won fights they should not win. They survived situations that should have killed them, and they never ever gave up. Tarek said quietly. There is something else about Captain Jinho. At his eye was not just any applicant to the Galactic Defense Force. He was specifically recommended by Admiral Krim after the Outer Rim incident. Murray felt her chest tighten. What Outer Rim incident? The one where a single human freighter held off a raider fleet for 6 hours, saving an entire colony. The captain of that freighter was Jinho. Stared at the report, feeling something she rarely experienced. She had been so focused on species superiority and ancient achievements that she had completely missed the individual she had judged. Jinho, not for who he was, but for what species he belonged to. The Outer Rim incident had happened 2 years ago. A peaceful mining colony had been attacked by raiders who wanted to take their equipment and sell the colonists into slavery. The local authorities had been 3 hours away when the distress call came in, but Jinho had been there flying an old cargo ship that should not have been able to fight military vessels. He had somehow held off the entire raider fleet until help arrived. Every civilian on that colony had lived because one human had decided that their lives mattered more than his own safety. The defense force had wanted to give him a medal. He had turned it down, saying he was just doing his job, but they had also rejected his application to join them. Why? Mireille asked. Politics, Tarek said simply. The major powers in the galaxy are not ready to accept humans as equals. They see your species as newcomers who need to be kept in their place. Admiral Krim had recommended Jinho for immediate acceptance into the elite forces, but the council had overruled him. They were afraid of what it would mean if humans started proving themselves capable of things that the ancient species struggled with. So instead they had rejected him again and again, until he had given up trying to join them and started working on his own. Mireille thought about the night in the cantina when she had humiliated him in front of everyone. She remembered calling him Mr. Almost and laughing at his dreams. Now she realized that she had been mocking someone who had already proven himself a hero multiple times over. The worst part was that she had been part of the system that kept him down. She had been one of the voices insisting that humans were not ready for positions of responsibility in the galactic community. But after seeing what Jinho and his crew had accomplished, with nothing but determination and improvised equipment, she was beginning to think that maybe the galaxy was not ready for humans, not because they were too primitive, but because they were too good at making the impossible look easy. Captain Jinho appeared in the doorway of the observation lounge. He had cleaned up since the battle, but she could still see the exhaustion in his eyes. Ambassador, he said, may I speak with you? Private Tarek took the hint and left them alone. She expected him to be angry. She expected him to demand an apology for the way she had treated him. She expected him to remind her of every cruel word she had spoken. Instead, he just looked out at the stars. The colonies we serve, he said quietly, they are small and poor, and forgotten by the major powers. Most of them do not even appear on the official star charts, but they are full of people who are trying to build something better. They are farmers and miners and researchers and dreamers. They are the reason I do this job. He turned to look at her, not to prove anything to people like you, but to help people who actually need help. She felt tears forming in her eyes, something that rarely happened to Altarians. Jinho, I owe you an apology. No, he said, you owe me nothing. But those people on the colonies, they deserve better than being ignored by the galaxy. And you deserve better than being judged by the color of your skin or the age of your civilization. As he walked away, Mireille realized that she had learned something important about humanity. They did not want her apology. They did not want her approval. They did not want anything from her at all. They Just wanted to be left alone to do what they did best, help people who needed help, and that was exactly what made them dangerous to the established order of things. Mireille ran through the corridors of Kepler Station like her life depended on it, because it did. Behind her, she could hear the heavy footsteps of hegemony soldiers getting closer. With each passing second, their weapons discharged energy bolts that left scorch marks on the walls just inches from where she had been moments before. The evacuation alarm was still wailing, and panicked civilians filled the corridors. Some were human, some were alien, but all of them were running toward the emergency exits. The chaos was exactly what Jinho had wanted. It would make it almost impossible for the hegemony forces to track one fleeing diplomat, but almost was not good enough when your life was on the line. She burst into Docking Bay 7 and saw the most beautiful sight in the galaxy. The Resilience was waiting for her with her cargo ramp down, and Captain Jinho standing at the entrance. He was holding a human-made pulse rifle, and his face was calm despite the insanity of what he had just done. About time, he said with a smile. I was starting to think you had changed your mind. Never, she gasped, racing up the ramp. Get us out of here. The escape was harrowing. The Resilience had to navigate through the station's superstructure while under fire from pursuing ships. The hegemony forces were trying to disable them without destroying the station, but that still left plenty of room for violence. Bora flew the cargo ship through maintenance tunnels that were barely wide enough for their hull. She used the station's artificial gravity to slingshot around obstacles and perform maneuvers that should have been impossible for a ship that size. In the engine room, Kyung was performing miracles to keep their systems running under the strain. The modified engines were running at dangerous levels, but they were still holding together. The hegemony ships were faster and more maneuverable, but they were also constrained by the need to avoid civilian casualties. The Resilience had no such limitations, because Jinho trusted his crew to thread the needle between protecting innocent lives and escaping their pursuers. They emerged from the station at full burn with half the hegemony fleet on their tail. Jinho had been recording everything since the moment they received Mireille's distress call. Now he transmitted all of it to both Altarian and Terran authorities. The evidence was overwhelming. The hegemony had attempted to assassinate a diplomat to start a war. The pursuing ships broke off their chase as soon as they realized their mission had been exposed. There was no point in continuing the pursuit when their crimes had already been broadcast across the galaxy. As they jumped to hyperspace, Jinho finally allowed himself to relax. The adrenaline was still coursing through his system, but they had made it. They had saved Ambassador Mireille and exposed the hegemony plot. So, he said, turning to face her, I guess I am not Mr. Almost anymore. Mireille looked at him with eyes that held more than gratitude. She had seen him save her life twice now, and each time he had done it without hesitation or expectation of reward. No, she said quietly, you are the guy I text come get me at midnight. You are the one who shows up when everyone else has given up. You are the one who makes the impossible look easy. I am just human, he said. Exactly, she replied, and that is more than enough. As the Resilience carried them toward safety, Mireille realized she had learned something important about humanity. They did not need to be the strongest or the smartest or the most advanced. They just needed to be themselves, and that was often exactly what the galaxy needed most. The war that the hegemony had tried to start never came. Instead, humanity's actions that night sparked something else entirely. The recordings from Kepler Station were broadcast across the galaxy, showing a single human cargo ship outmaneuvering an entire fleet of military vessels to save an alien diplomat. The story spread from system to system, growing with each telling, but more importantly, the evidence of the hegemony plot created a political scandal that brought down their entire leadership. The coalition of species that had opposed human expansion suddenly found themselves fighting for their own survival. Ambassador Mireille used her newfound influence to push through a series of reforms that gave humans equal representation in the galactic government. For the first time in their history, humans were not just tolerated members of the galactic community, but respected partners. Captain Jinho continued running cargo to the outer colonies, but now he did it with the full support of the galactic authorities. The Resilience was officially designated as a special operations vessel with the authority to respond to emergencies anywhere in human space. Young's innovations were studied by engineers throughout the galaxy. His impossible devices became the foundation for a new generation of technology that combined human creativity with alien knowledge. Bora was offered a position as a flight instructor at the Galactic Naval Academy. She turned it down, preferring to stay with her crew. But her maneuvers were added to the official tactical manual. The three of them had become legends without ever meaning to. They were just humans doing what humans did best, helping people who needed help, but sometimes that was exactly what made someone a hero. Months later, Myre was preparing for another diplomatic mission when she received a message from an old friend. The Outer Rim colonies were reporting unusual activity in their sector, pirates or raiders or something worse. She looked at the message for a long moment, then activated her personal communicator. Jinho, she said, when he answered, "This is Myre. I hate to bother you, but I could use some help on the other end of the line." She heard him chuckle. "What do you need, Ambassador?" "Just someone who does not give up," she said. "I think I can manage that," he replied. "Where do you need?" Myre smiled as she gave him the coordinates. She had called him Mr. Almost once because she thought he was not good enough to succeed. Now she called him because she knew he was exactly good enough to succeed at anything he set his mind to. He was human, and that was more than enough. The galaxy was a dangerous place full of pirates and politicians and people who wanted to start wars for their own benefit, but it was also full of 6 months had passed since the rescue of the Harmony, and Jinho had almost forgotten what it felt like to be called Mr. Almost. The colonies along the Outer Rim now knew the Resilience by name and reputation. They knew that when Captain Jinho made a promise, he kept it. The cargo ship had become something of a legend among the frontier settlements. She was the ship that took contracts others would not touch, and somehow always delivered. She had rescued miners from collapsed asteroids, evacuated civilians from war zones, and even provided escort services for other merchant vessels. Word traveled fast in the outer colonies, and good news traveled faster than bad. Every successful mission brought new contracts and new opportunities to help people who needed it. Jinho found that he liked this life better than anything the Galactic Defense Force could have offered him. He was his own captain, answering to no one but his conscience and his crew. They went where they wanted, helped who they chose, and made their own rules. Kyung had turned the engine room into a workshop where he built impossible devices from scrapped parts. He had invented a shield generator that could absorb energy from enemy weapons and redirect it back at them. He had modified their communications array to punch through jamming that should have been impossible to break. Bora had become one of the most skilled pilots in the Outer Rim. She could thread the Resilience through asteroid fields that would challenge military corvettes. She could outrun ships twice as fast and outmaneuver vessels designed for combat. Together, they had built something that the major powers in the galaxy could not understand or control. A small crew of humans who succeeded not through superior technology or ancient wisdom, but through determination and the willingness to try things that everyone else said would not work. Meanwhile, Ambassador Myre had been promoted to senior ambassador, tasked with establishing new diplomatic relations with emerging species. It was prestigious work that took her to the most important meetings in the galaxy, but she found herself thinking often about the human captain who had saved her life. She had tried to forget about that night in the cantina when she had humiliated him in front of everyone. She had tried to convince herself that her promotion was based on merit and not on the political connections her rescue had created. The truth was more complicated. The rescue had made her famous throughout the diplomatic corps. Everyone knew the story of how a single human cargo ship had defeated 3 Corvaxi raiders to save an Altarian delegation. The story had grown in the telling until some versions had Jinho single-handedly destroying an entire pirate fleet, but Myre knew the real story, and she knew that the truth was more impressive than any exaggeration. She had been studying human military actions for months now, trying to understand what made them so effective in situations where other species failed. The answer was disturbing to someone who had spent her entire career believing in the superiority of ancient civilizations. Humans did not follow the rules everyone else had developed careful protocols and procedures over thousands of years of space travel. They had safety regulations and tactical doctrines and diplomatic procedures that covered every possible situation. Humans ignored all of that and improvised. They treated every problem as if it For the first time anyone had ever encountered it, they came up with solutions that no one else would have thought of. They took risks that other species would never consider. Most importantly, they seemed to genuinely care about helping people even when there was no profit or political advantage to be gained. The call came at 0347, ship time, jolting Jinho from sleep in his small cabin aboard the Resilience. His personal communicator was flashing with an emergency signal from a secured Altarian frequency. He recognized the encryption signature immediately. Jinho. Murray's voice was strained and frightened. "I need help. I'm sorry to call you like this, but I do not know who else to trust." He was already reaching for his clothes. "Where are you, Kepler?" "Station docking Bay 94. My diplomatic convoy was attacked. I managed to escape, but they are still hunting me. The station security has been compromised. I cannot trust anyone here." Jinho felt ice form in his stomach. Kepler Station was a major commercial hub in neutral space. If someone was willing to attack an Altarian diplomat there, it meant the situation was much worse than a simple pirate raid. "I will be there in 4 hours. Stay hidden." "Jinho, why are you doing this after everything I said to you?" He paused in the middle of putting on his boots, thinking about the question. "Because that is what humans do, Murray. We help people who need help. Even people who called us Mr. Almost." The connection went quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was very soft. "Thank you. Resilience burned through space at maximum acceleration. Her engines pushed beyond safe limits. Kyung worked miracles in the engine room to keep the ship together while Bora plotted courses that would shave precious minutes off their journey." Captain Bora said as they approached Kepler Station. "I am reading multiple ships in the area. Military configurations, but no identification signals." "Pirates?" Jinho asked, studying the tactical display. "Worse, these look like hegemony Black Ops vessels. If they are after Ambassador Murray, this is about more than just pirates." Jinho felt his blood run cold. The hegemony was a coalition of species that opposed human expansion into the galaxy. They believed that humans were a threat to the established order and should be contained to their home system. If they were willing to attack an Altarian diplomat, it meant they were preparing for something much worse than a diplomatic incident. "Get me a secure channel to the ambassador," he ordered. "And Kyung, I need every trick you have got. We are going to need to be very creative about this rescue." Kepler Station was a massive commercial hub with docking bays for thousands of ships. The station spun slowly in space, creating artificial gravity for the millions of beings who lived and worked there. But something was wrong. The normal traffic patterns were disrupted. Security patrols were moving in coordinated sweeps, and several of the major docking bays had been quietly sealed off. "Murray," Jinho said into his communicator, "I can see the station, but there are hegemony ships in the area. This is not just about you anymore." "I know," she whispered from her hiding place in the station's maintenance tunnels. "I intercepted their communications. They are planning to frame humans for my assassination. It would give them the excuse they need to declare war on the Terran Alliance." Jinho closed his eyes and tried to think. The hegemony had been looking for an excuse to move against humanity. For years, an assassination of a prominent alien diplomat by human terrorists would be perfect. "Can you access the station security systems?" he asked. "Limited access, but yes, good, in exactly 10 minutes. I need you to trigger a general evacuation alarm. We are going to give them a show they will not forget." "What are you planning?" "Something very human." As the evacuation alarm began to wail throughout Kepler Station, the Resilience executed a docking maneuver that violated every safety protocol ever written. Instead of using the designated docking bay, Jinho brought his ship directly into the station's central hub. The artificial gravity helped them, but the maneuver was still insane. Any mistake would have sent them crashing into the station's superstructure, killing thousands of innocent people. "This is completely crazy," Bora muttered as she fought to keep the ship stable. "This is human." Kyung corrected with a grin. The hegemony ships moved to intercept, but found themselves facing an unexpected problem. The Resilience was now inside the station's defensive perimeter. Any attack on the cargo ship would also damage the station itself. Ambassador Jinho called over the com. "You have about 90 seconds to reach docking bay 7. We will be waiting behind her." She could hear the heavy footsteps of hegemony soldiers, but ahead of her was hope. She ran